I'm Dan Smolin. I built a successful executive career in marketing and communications before becoming a top headhunter and founding my own executive search firm. Now get this, every day, mainstream media runs stories in which old school bosses and thought leaders frame your work and workplace issues in ways that are often divisive and unmeaningful. And that's just crazy. The time has come for you to answer the question, what's your work fit, so that your work and career fit who you are, how you want to live, and what you want your lasting contributions to be. What's your work fit? It answers your questions and tackles the issues that keep you up at night about advancing your career in this time of workplace revolution. So let's get started. Hey, good day, everyone. Dan Smolin. Welcome to What's Your Work Fit. I hope you're having a good and successful workday and week. You know, we could not do this show without you. We have built this platform organically by one, by encouraging workplace professionals to join us and be part of the discussion. And if you're new to What's Your Work Fit, I encourage you to subscribe to our two platforms. We're on LinkedIn at What's Your Work Fit. Just hit that blue follow button. We're also on the What's Your Work Fit YouTube channel. You can hit that black subscribe button, and then you'll never miss a live show or playback of any of our past episodes and other content that we publish. One other ask that I have, if you enjoy the content and the experience of What's Your Work Fit, I encourage you to tell 5 of your friends to subscribe to us on those other wonderful and meaningful things and not the all-consuming time suck of a day. Okay. There we go. We're having a few technical difficulties. It's my great pleasure to welcome our guest today, Mary E. Maloney. How are you, Mary?
I am fantastic, Dan. Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's so great to see you.
So great to see you. Before we get to our question, I'm wondering if you could tell our audience about Revealing Genius, your company and your brand. What's it all about and what's its value?
Sure, I'd be happy to. As Dan mentioned, we're experiencing a little bit of technical difficulties. So Dan, if you can hear us.
I can hear you.
You can, okay, terrific, because you went a little frozen there, so I think we're good. My name is Mary E. Maloney. I'm the founding CEO of Revealing Genius. I go by Mary E., and I promised I would tell that story, Dan. The reason I go by Mary E. is I come from a big Irish family, and all of the women in my family are named Mary. So I have 5 siblings. Yes. So I'll run down the line. So I have a sister, Mary Margaret. I have a sister, Mary Frances. I have a sister, Mary Teresa. My mother is Mary Frances. My brother, Patrick, married Mary Ellen. Now, my brother, Sean, his significant other is Shannon O'Grady. So we started calling her Mary Shannon so she would feel included. And I'm Mary Elizabeth. So therefore, I go by Mary E. So folks call me Mary E. And it's actually become part of my brand.
That's a wonderful story. You're like George Foreman.
Exactly. Yes, it's a lot of fun. It really is. We're very close knit. Being family oriented is part of my personal brand, and we even have a hashtag. It's hashtag Maloney Sibs Rally. That's our hashtag.
That is wonderful. That is wonderful. Hopefully we don't have any more gremlins in the show today. I'm not sure why that's happening, but hopefully we can play through.
No worries.
I want to talk about the lead question that came in from our viewer, Lauren. Hey, Lauren. Lauren has been doing knowledge work now for about 2 years, and she's eager to find her next career opportunity but her job search efforts have languished. And this is interesting. So a friend suggested to Lauren that she do some personal branding to get her career success uh, empowered. And so Lauren's not a natural marketer. She's not a marketer at all. She doesn't even think much about any brand's appeal. And yet she's intrigued by the idea. And thus she asks you, Mary E., how do I brand myself for my next career act? So help her out here. How
Yeah,
does she get started?
yeah, I'm happy to. And it's Tara. Is it Tara that is?
Lauren.
Lauren, forgive me. Oh, forgive me. Lauren, nice to meet you. Great question. How do I brand myself for my next career act? Well, you have Dan here too, who is a marketing guru, and he's run recruiting agencies. So you certainly have two folks here who are more than happy to help you. The place that I would recommend one to get started is not to rush to create assets. And what I mean by that is I think that's probably one of the most common positioning and messaging mistakes that I see is folks will rush to put up their LinkedIn profile or revamp their resume, or maybe they're positioning for a board seat, and they double down on the document, if you will. And my recommendation, Dan, and we've talked about this, is to take a step back and really understand, get very clear on what I call a brand manifesto. It's your purpose, your why, and your hows. And the reason is, once you have that, and I recommend really determining that as early in your career as possible, because that's your true north. That's going to be your guidepost, if you will, no matter what you do. Your what as an executive is likely going to change many times, but your why is going to stay constant. And if you are tuned in, tapped in, turned on to your why, you'll never get lost on your way. And you might be doing something really, really different. And knowing your why and knowing your purpose and knowing your hows, like how you show up, like how you will raise your floor in terms of excellence, I think is a leadership imperative. I think everyone should have a brand manifesto. I'm so effusive about it because it will guide you to your next step. And this is most important, it will also, Lauren, help you to be very discerning about what to say no to, because then you're in a position of power. When you know your purpose, why, and hows, you know yourself really well, and you know where you're going to thrive, and you know where you might need to shed.
My late father would have called all that navel gazing. Just go get a job. Just make money. But what you are saying is so important and so meaningful for people today in the workplace, because they are going to have many different career journey steps. I had 4. My daughter's probably going to have a dozen, if not more. She's 23 years old. So to Lynn's question, how do you get this process started? How do you get to the whys and the hows that will lead them to a better place?
Yes, what I would recommend doing is to get a journal and start writing for 7 days, and start with one question. And it has to do with branding, but not really. This is the question you need to ask yourself in your journal. It is, and ask yourself in the third person, how do I want to live? How does Lauren want to live? Right. How does Dan want to live? How does Mary want to live? How do you want to live? When you're in that transition phase, it can be very exciting and very daunting at the same time, because there's so many possibilities, and it's overwhelming because there's so many possibilities.
Right.
That's the question I would start with, because the way you want to live in your 20s, and you can argue with me here, Dan, is very different from the way you want to live in your 50s or 60s. Yes?
Oh, indeed. I think Dan in his 20s was all about serendipity. Dan now is about making sure that I carve up enough time for family and purpose and a slower pace, if you will, that's a little more
100%.
intentional, smell the roses.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Another question that I can offer for folks on the call who are trying to determine what's their work fit. This is a really good one.
Mm-hmm.
It's a simple exercise, but it's actually quite profound. And what I recommend to folks is draw a line down the middle of the page, and on the left-hand side of the page, write more of this, please. And then on the right side of the page, write less of this, please. And then just start thinking about what gives you energy. And if that's a daunting task, get your calendar out and look at where you spent your time last week. What did you do? Where did you go? Oh, what did you focus on? Who did you spend time with? Did it give you energy? And if you actually take the blocks from your calendar and have to put it into more of this or less of this, like where does it go? Those are telltale signs on it will start to build a portfolio of line items that will literally give you a checklist of what's your work fit. I'll tell you a funny story, Dan. I did this exercise many years ago. I was commuting to work. I was driving, and I got stuck between two gigantic box trucks, and I was white knuckled. And I remember like blurting out saying, "Less of this, please," because I've never liked to drive. I don't like to drive. So I literally put that in my less of please box, and I just left it there. I didn't judge it. And when it came time for me to transition, I actually made a major transition career shift. I looked at that list and I said, wouldn't it be nice if I could work from home or anywhere in the world and I didn't have to drive? And here I am.
First of all, what were you doing before you were doing what you're now doing? What was your earliest career chapter about?
Oh, thank you. I want to ask you the same question, of course.
All
So
right.
I've always been in the branding business, Dan, and it's mostly been in healthcare. I started in rehab and acute care in the marketing departments, and I was laid off twice. So I had to reinvent myself twice. And the second time around, a physician actually funded my company. I started a company when I was in my 20s, thanks to a doctor, an ophthalmologist, actually. He
Wow.
believed in me when I didn't quite believe in myself. And I ended up growing that company, and I sold it when I was 32. It was a medical marketing firm. So I did positioning, messaging, branding for physician practices, every kind of specialty. And then I went on to be the CEO of the company that I sold to. And then subsequently was tried my hand in a $1 billion company I worked with, Intuit. That was a great run.
Mm-hmm.
And was a chief marketing officer, and then became the CEO of North America for a healthcare tech firm. They were based in Britain, in Great Britain, and they wanted to bring a healthcare technology software to the United States. So I've had wonderful experience. The common thread is brand.
Interesting.
So I've always been in the branding business, and it was really just recently, right before the COVID, that I made a major shift. And it was mainly because my father became ill, and I needed to figure out how do I want to live where I could incorporate taking care of him and still working and being relevant. And I did. And that's how Revealing Genius was born. So I added executive personal branding to my portfolio using the same tenets that I've used for years and years and years on the corporate side, now using them on the executive side for individuals, if that makes sense. So I've always been in brand. How about you? You've had really interesting, like there's been, there's a common thread. I see the common thread, but I want to hear it from you.
Well, branding, yes, absolutely. I mean, from my earliest career chapters, I was an advertising agency guy, an account exec, account supervisor type, and then later on into marketing operations. I was the guy they'd run to when they sold off on something novel that had never been done before, and they said, "You figure it out, keep it on budget." So along the way, without naming any brands, we did work with healthcare and pharma and companies that were both direct to consumer and physician oriented. So I think we do have some overlap. Like you, I've been laid off a few times. The first time was on my 32nd birthday. That was fun. But I don't look at the layoffs and the pivots as bad things. They were actually gifts to me. And I was able to take all that marketing and branding experience and digital advertising experience, direct marketing experience, and carry all the knowledge that I'd accrued along the way to every milepost ahead on the journey through 20 years of executive recruitment. Absolutely. I was not aware that this was a branding exercise, but to place really good candidates, I would often have to get them to realign their thinking about what they wanted to do. I mean, we weren't thinking in terms of, I want more of this, I want less of this. But in a way, we were touching upon some of those goals, if you will.
Yeah, for
so,
sure.
Yeah, a lot of commonalities.
Definitely.
Hopefully we don't have any more hiccups here. Tal, hey, Tal. Tal kind of follows along with us here in that my career was not linear. It doesn't sound like yours was. My oldest brother's was. He spent his entire career in the corporate side with one company, which was both good and bad. I had more of an episodic journey like Tal talks about. I'm wondering how the episodic career journey impacts branding, or should I say, how does branding impact the episodic journey? It could be either way. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm hoping, Dan, that you and I can, start a conversation to change the discourse about being in transition. And you can, argue with me. I think there's a bit of a stigma attached to, quote unquote, I'll put this in air quotes, being in transition. When someone calls you and says, "Oh, I'm in transition," or "I'm looking for a new job," there's still, to me, and I could be wrong, I think it's getting better. I think you and I can help. I think there's still a bit of a stigma attached to like being in that gray space. Whereas I think you and I have had experiences where we can do a look back and say, those were the greatest gifts of our career, because it enables us to shed one chapter and then open the door and step through another where there's growth. So I would even go as far as saying, I'm talking with an executive right now who is burnt, and I mean fried, I mean flattened. And the conversation that I'm having with her one-on-one is, what would it look like to take a year off? Like, what if you gave yourself that gift? If you have the means to do it, or you just take 3 months off.
Stop right there, Mary. Yeah. I'm thinking you said that to her and she's like, what? I can't do that.
Right.
What, are you crazy?
Because her career has been very linear, and she doesn't want to have a quote unquote a gap in her resume. And my argument to that is, what if we turned that on its head and said, the new normal in our world should be, we should look for ways to take breaks, if you will. And I don't mean, take breaks and just go sit on a beach for a year, which is possible, and she might do that.
Right.
She has a lot of energy, probably not, but learn something new, travel and live somewhere else and have a whole different experience, and make that part of your journey where you took a career break. I think that is a positive thing, not a negative thing. What are your thoughts, Dan?
Well, I want to ask you a question. Does your client have any interest in an entrepreneurial next act?
I think it's still too soon to know, because she's ramping down. Oh. So she knows that her position is going to be eliminated. The company's been wonderful and clear and transparent and offering her package, et cetera, et cetera. She has not exited yet. So I don't think she's given herself the time and the grace to really think about what next. And I would really advise that she just take some time off and practice carefully timelessness, because she's been going Mach 10 with her hair on fire for a very long time. And that's the only mode she knows. Like, so you're absolutely right. So to actually suggest a break, oh my gosh. But the last time I talk with her, it's starting. I think her intuition is telling her that a career break might be exactly what she needs right now. And I'm more than happy to help her strategically position what she's doing on that break and message what the next step might look like. She might decide to become an entrepreneur. She might decide to go run a company. She might decide to start a foundation. I think it's scary to look at all that white space and not have a clear vision, a line. What's the next step on the line? And I mean, I think if we can embrace that, there's tremendous growth there.
One of the difficult things for careerists is when, and I spent my free time on a chiropractic table dealing with all that burnout stress, especially in the agency days. 15 years of my career was in that space, if you will. It is terrifying to get off the carousel, because getting back on is very difficult, even if you need to take a break. I will tell you, Mary, the reason I brought up being an entrepreneur is that of the peers that I had in the agency space, and even one level above me, superiors, I would say 95% of them either stayed in the business as so-called 1099s, as independent contractors, or they went to a completely different line of work where they had agency over the day. And the way they had agency over the day was they started a brand, they started a business, they started a service operation, whatever it may be. Now, I'll add another element to this, which is something that I and some of my friends are seeing, which is that people are burned out, not just for the work, but just because the last couple of years have been so traumatizing, what with COVID shutdowns and not knowing where you have to go to work, if it's going to be remote or if you have to be in a co-location or whatever. We've had all these disruptions. And I'm hearing from people who are saying, you know what, I like the fact that I've been able to own part of the day that I never had before, because when I was working in corporate, I was always on. I was always watched. Even when I took a lunch break or whatever, my brain was still thinking about what I had to do. And it didn't shut off until maybe I got home. In all reality, it probably never shut off. So that workplace owned you 24/7. What I'm hearing from a lot of people is, I really liked having agency over the day so that I could break it up. I could go meet my significant other for a lunch break. I could go see my child in their school play, whatever it might be. I could go get my hair cut. I had a boss whose barber fired him because he canceled so many haircutting appointments. That's not an unusual story. So I'm curious to know your thoughts of, are you seeing some of the same future trends percolating that may pivot people who need to make a break, like your client, and say, you know what, I'm going to do it differently. I'm not going to trade one bad workplace for another. I'm going to own my day. I'll be a 1099. I'll do some of the same work. I'll just be, I'll have my former boss will now be my client, so to speak.
Sure, definitely. And I have to give a nod to you, Dan, for the title of your podcast, What's Your Work Fit? And I think we established in the opening remarks that your work fit, it is different as you progress through your career. Right. Dan in his 20s work fit was a little bit different from Dan right now. And I think your purpose, your why, your hows. I mean, I think we're kindred spirits in a lot of ways. I loved some of the things you said in your intro that that you want people to have more satisfying professional experiences and outcomes. That's what you stand for. That's part of your brand. You want colleagues to seek lasting work and career contributions. That is, I mean that makes your day. That lights you up. And I think we're both storytellers. And to answer your question directly, I am seeing lots of clients that are coming to me, and they're looking at that blank slate, and again making that mistake where they're saying, oh, I've got to put a LinkedIn profile up, I've got to update my resume, without really taking the time to take a little step back and ask, how do I want to live, and what gives me energy? More of this, please. Less of this, please. And then build your model around the answers to that. That's your work fit for now. And then when you transition again, do it again, because it what gives you energy at this juncture of your career might not give you energy 10 years from now. I have a client right now. She exited her company, did very, very well. And she had no idea what she was going to do next. She's very young, so she still has a lot of gas left in the tank. And that's what we worked on together. She came to me saying, I need help rebranding myself. And where we are is we're working very, very carefully on giving her clarity around what next? What does that look like? And out of that is exercises. She's learned she loves working with women. Out of those exercises, she said she doesn't want to be on airplanes every 3 to 4 weeks anymore. Not another day. So really thinking long and hard about how you want to live, what gives you energy, what doesn't give you, and put those answers out there uncensored. Like don't judge them, because they're huge clues to your next step in your personal brand. And we've actually, but I'm very excited for her, because she said, wouldn't it be nice if I could help other women founders exit their businesses? And she just lit up, she just lit up. And I said, oh, interesting. So that's something she actually might do. So there's the possibilities come out of the questions.
Our dear shared friend, Carla Fleming, came up with the notion of a brand badge, which is brilliant. So what she means by that is it's that, normally, well, I'll put it into advertising terms. Somebody might say, I drive a BMW, and that kind of aligns me with certain attributes. I wear Burberry. I vacation in certain places at certain properties, that type of thing. And the old notion of branding, makes us look like NASCAR drivers, and we have logos all over our race jackets. What Carla was saying is just the flip of that. What it's saying is, how does that brand honor my brand badge? Do they wear my brand badge? And as she started developing this idea, I've been driving a Subaru now for the last 35 years. I've had 10 of them. And so am I wearing their brand badge because I keep buying them? They're reliable. I like four-wheel drive, on weekends when my wife is popping up stores to sell vintage clothing, I can pack everything in the car. Maybe, but maybe it's also the opposite. And I think in the case of this brand Subaru, they get me. Because if they didn't, I would probably stop driving their cars and stop, buying them. So Carla came up with this idea of a brand badge, and it made, in anticipation of our discussion today, and oh, by the way, the big news that broke yesterday about Amazon calling everybody back into the office 5 days a week, the return to the office policy, and that's blowing up the internet. It got me thinking of the badging of Amazon. Some people get out of B school and they're like, I want to work at Amazon. But does Amazon look at their brand badge and say, we want to figure out a way that we make it work for them? And the The jury's still out on that, Mary. I mean, a lot of people are saying, yeah, if you're paid a lot at Amazon, you're probably going to go back because you don't want to walk away from the money and the benefits. But what's going to happen in their acquisition of new talent? Are they thinking about the brand badge of those new hires, those up and comers? Or are those up and comers going to relate better to a company that's openly saying, we have a different take on workplace? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, shout out to Carla Fleming first. I love Carla. She was in my 7-day brand summit and just added tremendous value. And I think Carla's probably a great example of someone who has found their work fit. Like she knows at what she is the best in the world. I mean, she's a product management guru,
Yeah,
and my understanding is she uses AI to create personalized marketing experiences.
she does.
And she's done that for many years in the software companies that she's worked with. And because of that, brand badging, if you will, I wish she could trademark it and own it. She's the last company she was with, she grew a product line from 200 million to over 1 billion with a B. So there's something to be said about the brand badge and that personalized marketing. And I feel very strongly that people should align their personal brand with the organization's brand. So coming from the corporate branding world, I spent 25 years helping organizations figure out their purpose, their why, their house, and then strategically hire to it to influence the culture. And if there was a disconnect, if a person's brand didn't align with the corporate brand, then it probably wasn't going to be a good culture fit. Kind of like, what is your work fit? So if you flip that, and if you really know your brand, your purpose, your why, your house, and then you bounce it off of the organizations, then you can find your work fit, and even more importantly, you can walk away.
Rob Longley, you win the day. I think Amazon's future workforce are going to be primarily robots. That is so funny. There may be a ring of truth to that. I don't know. I'm surrounded by their data centers here in Northern Virginia. Thanks, Rob. Let's talk about some of the attributes of career branding. This is from Harvard Business Review, and I'll just tee them off. Provides an opportunity for differentiation and more visibility. Reputation management, that's an interesting one. Obviously career advancement, but no brainer is networking opportunities. Wondering if, I never thought about this before, but I'm wondering if we could talk about reputation management, Mary. How can career branding soften out the edges, if you will, for a career that, let's say, the person worked as a marketing executive early on for a tobacco company or a gambling operation, and now they've got regret that that's gonna cause me problems for getting a job into something more corporate, socially responsible, if you will. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm actually working with a physician right now on reputation management, and I love how HBR lists the benefits. Differentiation, career branding will help you differentiate. Career branding will help with reputation management. Career branding will help you with so on and so forth. The question I have is, well, how do you differentiate? Like, how do you manage your reputation? And what I like to pose to folks are fill in the blank questions and get really clear on what do you want to stand for?
Right.
What is your reputation? And that's where the purpose why hows come in. Like your hows is all about your reputation. And I often in my 7-day summits, I will cue folks with fill in the blanks, such as a clue to your personal brand is filling in this question. I am the best in the world at X, and fill it in,
Yeah.
and see what comes up for you. Or if that's an impossible task, because we recognize, and I know, Dan, you've talked to a lot of clients about this, it's really hard to talk about oneself authentically.
Right.
It takes a bit of practice. Another one that I have is I often get thank you notes for X, and have a look at that. So that's a clue to your reputation, what you stand for, at what you are the best in the world, what people know you for.
Right.
And when you get really, really clear on that, then you have confidence. And I don't think we have confidence issues. I think we have clarity issues. So if you think about that, when you're clear, you're confident. And when you're confident, you have conviction. And when you have conviction, you kind of stand a little taller and you can walk through any doorway. And when you walk through a doorway with conviction, you have this energy about you. I mean, and we've all seen folks who walk through doorways, any doorway with conviction. And when you have that energy, you're going to have impact. And when you have impact, you're going to be fulfilled. And that's what you're looking for in terms of your work fit. So it starts all the way back with getting clear on your reputation. What is it that you stand for like no other? And I'll give you an example. Folks
Please.
probably on this call know Ariana Huffington from Huffington Post. And she inherited the company, and in her books, she tells this very compelling story. You might know it, of when she was taking her company public. She had been burning the candle at both ends. She was in a hotel, and it was evening, and she fell and she hit her cheek on a marble desk, and she broke her jaw. And they rushed her to the hospital, and they did a battery of tests. She couldn't move from her neck down. And they thought it was something neurological. And you're not going to believe what the diagnosis was. After 2 weeks of trying to discern what went wrong, the diagnosis was exhaustion. It was lack of sleep. So she literally fell asleep standing up and hit her cheek and was injured. And her adrenals shut down. Like her system just shut down. She couldn't move because she was so tired. So that experience was so traumatic for her that she went and started a company. She went and raised money. I think the initial rounds total about 45 million. And she started a company called Thrive Global, which you may know of it online. And she is emphatic about getting enough sleep. She's written many books about it. She feels like lack of sleep is endemic to our society.
Oh, amen.
That it's true. Yes. And that's what she stands for. That's what she when she leaves this earth, she wants to have that reputation for being able to change the mindset of folks about sleep. And she's done a really fine job. So the question then that I would ask is, what do you stand for? What's your reputation about? And Dan, I think you know yours. I mean, you have a podcast about it right now, which is pretty exciting.
Well, a life is not all work. And, some of my career pivots happened because of what happened externally. I lived in a community that had a lot of weird stuff going on, and I got involved in local politics to do a better job of managing the resources within the county. If I hadn't done that, I probably would not have stoked this lifelong ambition I had to be involved in sustainability and corporate responsibility, which was, until 5-6 years ago, a big part of my brand. It's now one of several attributes of my brand. And where I am today would not have happened if I hadn't had these externalities happening.
True, absolutely true. And our, as you mentioned it, our brands don't necessarily have to be all about work. And one fun question I love to ask folks when we're at roundtables, when I'm at a conference, or when there's when there's lots of people, like 8 to 10 people,
Yeah.
instead of asking the perfunctory question, where'd you fly in from? How's the weather today? All that. A great question to ask. And it's shocking to some folks, which is really fun, but it has stimulated some of the most interesting and profound conversations I have ever had.
Right.
And it is, what's the big relevant change that you want to see in the world? That's pretty much what you stand for. And it might not have anything to do with work.
No, but I wish more people asked it. That's really interesting. So, Mary, we got time for one more question, and then we got to get into asking you about your own work fit. I want to get to Jackie Young. Hey, Jackie, I love this. So, thought there is personal and there is professional. There are people whose brand is their personal life. They go to work to make a living, but that's not their life. As it happens, I've always strived to be passionate about my work, a combo. I'm not sure if I'm any further ahead. Oh, don't sell yourself short, my friend. Jackie is one of the most interesting marketers I know. I've known her practically all my life. And her personal life is really interesting. But that's okay. I mean, you talked about a lot of these things, Mary. There is some universality in Jackie's experience that bubbles up and informs the work she does, even though her personal brand may not talk about the work she does.
Yes, Jacqueline, I hope Jackie's okay. You have touched on a subject that I'm effusive about, and it's an area that I feel very strongly about, and I'll arm wrestle this one.
Okay.
I'll arm wrestle you on this one because I do feel so very strongly about it. There's this, I guess, a myth, or there's a best practice that denotes you must have a crisp elevator pitch, just one, like one line, like one pithy line that encapsulates, to Jackie's point, your personal and your professional interests. I don't agree with that. I heavily disagree. As a matter of fact, if you think about it from a matrix, like an XY axis, a matrix standpoint, and you think about situations that you are in, and I'll use an extreme example. Let's say that you are in a paneled boardroom. You're interviewing for a very big job, and the competition is fierce. The way that you talk about yourself is going to be very, very different than if you were, say, for example, on the soccer field watching your kid's soccer game, and you happen to be standing with other professionals who are watching their children play soccer as well. So if you're standing under the umbrella in the rain and someone says, hey, so what do you do? The answer to that in that situation is going to be very different from if the board chair is interviewing you and says, so tell me, how can you add value to this organization? That's a very different response. So I actually work with people. I do a lot of laser sessions where we actually create a matrix. So it's almost like it's like a tool in your toolbox where it's like a pick list. So you have messages in your back pocket that are already pre-prepared, and you can pick and choose and mix and match. I have a dear friend, she calls it a capsule collection.
Oh, I like that.
Yes. So credit where credit is due. Colleen Scollins, amazing colleague. She coined the phrase. So I wanted to give a nod to her, and it really does work when you spend the time up front really thinking about how you're going to walk through any doorway clear and confident with conviction. If you have this in your back pocket, you can handle any situation, any job interview, really.
Well, everything you're doing, I think, gets us to our humanity. And we've never had the permission structure to talk about our humanity. Throughout my long career, and especially in the early going, my notion of success as a turbocharged junior executive back in the day was based on, I am successful based on the things that my boss tells me make me successful. And while that probably had some instrumental benefit to me. It furthered my career along. It promoted me along early, very early in my career. I mean, at 27, I was running a big chunk of my agency's billings, and people celebrated that. But that made me physically ill at the end of the day. The stress of that. But if we get more to humanity, Mary, I think that's sort of like the control track in our lives. It's like, why do we get up in the morning? And don't tell me about money and recognition. Really, what is it that gets you up every day? You know, it may be like I hear from so many people to make a positive difference in the world. Okay, what does that mean? And they'll tell me. It's so natural to answer that question. Or it could be to, be present in others' lives. I hear that a lot too. A lot more now. So good on you. And thank you so much for the work you're doing. We've come to the end, I'm afraid to say. We're at the end of a really enjoyable discussion. But before we get to the last question I'm going to ask you, I'm wondering if Mary E. Maloney, you can point us to your social media and perhaps to where people can contact you directly to have a conversation.
Yes, I'll make it very easy. There's one place. It's the website, and it's revealinggenius.com.
Brilliant. Okay, let's get to our question here. This is the one I ask everybody, and everybody has their own answer. There's a uniqueness about how these questions get answered. So, Mary E. Maloney, what's your work fit? What attribute, condition, experience, place, or state of mind makes the work that you do a wonderful part of your day, doing many other wonderful and meaningful things, and not the all-consuming time suck of a day? What's your work fit?
My work fit involves talking with folks about things about the following, which folks might not ordinarily talk about, and that is having seventh generation impact. So when we talk about what's your work fit, we tend, including yours truly, tend to think and speak and talk about like what's right in front of us. But what I like to talk about is how are we as humans thinking about having seventh generation impact. I facilitate a course for eCornell on the art and science of branding, and we have an exercise on the reasons we work, and we use the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I'm sure you're aware of it. And we all share our top 10 reasons why we work, and a lot of it's motivation and some of it's hygiene. Like hygiene is I work to pay the mortgage, or I work for the benefits. And then we get into, well, what if those needs were met? And what if we talk about the top of the pyramid, which is self-actualization? Right. If all of those needs were met, then what would you do? What would you do in terms of work? And how can that have not just next generation, but seventh generation impact? What legacy are you leaving with the work that you do? That's my work fit. That I want to work with people who are thinking at that level.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
And you don't have to have a 30-40 year career to do it. I've talked with high school students. I've talked with early to mid careerists. The sooner the better that you can think that way. I highly recommend it, because that's the game, right? I mean, the game is to have impact no matter where you show up. There is no other game, right, Dan?
Right. And Mary, you've spoken to student audiences. I've addressed college student audiences where the room is mostly about to graduate seniors, and they are traumatized. They're absolutely frazzled because they are absolutely terrified about making this transition into work, because they want it to be perfect. Because that's what they've heard all their lives. You got to do everything. You got to be perfect. You got to be on time. You got to outperform. And it's the why and how that you talked about at the beginning of this that's completely missed in their conversations. And I love what you're doing, and it's absolutely liberating. And it's my hope my daughter's generation, Gen Z, the one that follows her, Gen Alpha, is liberated to do exactly what we've talked about today. So thank you. This has been great. I hope we can get you back on What's Your Work Fit at a future date. Would you like to come back on?
100% with one caveat. And
What's
that caveat is that you will join me on my podcast. It's called The Great Work of Your Life. If you would do that, we'll pinky promise, I would absolutely love to come back. Yes, and I think you might share, this sentiment. It is not cliche to do what you love. That is the game. Do what you figure out what it is that you love and keep doing it, because that's how you have seventh generation impact.
Well, let's figure out a date and time to do that, and stick around. I'm going to end the show, but stay in the green room. We got martinis and little finger sandwiches and stuff like that.
Of course you do, Dan. I would expect nothing less. Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor to be here.
My pleasure.